This topic for this week is going to be all about self-discovery. So you have autism. Great. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. There's a lot of years spent in, just laying the framework for you to be able to even just talk, be able to find your words, be able to start then having sentences, then developing the ability to have some type of social interaction, understanding social cues. Then went through the adult living program and learned some basic skills about just life. And it seems like, for the first 21 years, of your life, it was all spent on just learning these basic skills, let alone wrestling with this whole topic of self-discovery. Like, what do you do? So tell us about your experience. Tell us about when you started making the transition from just learning base skills to now wanting to really understand who you were as a person and what you wanted to do with your life.
Well, for starters, I didn't really quite take the time to actually discover who I am as a person growing up. It's always the same thing, during school, at home, it's just the same old stuff, do this, do that. And for a long time, I was all right with that, with the whole, being controlled in such a way. I didn't really quite, entirely have like my own understanding or thinking and such. So that's why around in my late teens or probably very early 20s, that's when I get to, have self-discovery and make my own decisions, make my own conscience and all that. And with self-discovery, there's always a question of why. There's always a question of, why you feel this way. Why do you like this? Why don't you like this? Once you figure out the reason why, then there's something to celebrate about.
How did you start coming up with those answers then to why?
The biggest breakthrough about self-discovery was during the end of high school when all seemed to be ending so quickly, and there's going to be a big, humongous change. It's
right,
like
major transition.
It's like it's all going to be done. Then what? And that's when I was feeling like I was in trouble. I feel like I need some help.
I mean, that was a really kind of dark time for you. I mean, that was really tough.
Absolutely. I didn't like the adult living program at first because it's a new place. It's like, I'd rather be home, do whatever and such too. And I didn't like that place first, but as I, go through the adult living program, I realized that's one of the biggest assets and one of the biggest helps in moving forward.
One of the things we worked on as well, it was this whole concept of the world according to Tyler, right? And just because you believe it to be so doesn't necessarily make it true. And I think that was
hard sometimes.
Yeah. And that was a really key concept because, this world according to Tyler, that's the way Tyler sees the world, but it wasn't necessarily really kind of the reality of what was going on. Maybe thoughts were exaggerated or they were misinterpreted or other cues. And so we did a lot of work.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's, it was hard because I don't know what is or what is not. That's where it gets really difficult. And when I'm reminded to the world according to Tyler, it's like, oh, come on, not this again. It's like, I don't mean it like that. Come on.
Yeah.
It was hard, on those times anyway, too.
Did you have anxiety about your future?
All the time. It all goes back to back in high school when you're about to leave. That's where anxiety super kicks in. So much to the point you almost see the cave. Okay, sure. I mean, the school is out. I won't be able to see the same kids again, or I won't be able to see the same teachers again, or environment, or
it was your routine.
This routine I was so used to. It's even if I could change schools, it's still the same. Get up and do work and see people here and there and such. It's like, all that is going to be gone. So what do we do? Well, Dad has actually reminded me about the book. The book. Well, what's the book? I even went to the point where it's like, what are you talking about? I'm serious. It's like, no, your book, the Population 1 book. We can make something out of this. And I didn't really quite believe it at first. I was still in this denial effect, saying that, this has nothing to do with it. I just wrote, for the school. That's one of the main reasons why I did and such too. And, the dad and everyone else says, no, this is worth something. We can make something out. This can be probably your future. I think the biggest breaking point for me was my dad reminded me saying that you won. And I was like, you won. That felt really good. Feels like a victory and such. Well, you won, meaning like you completed the book, you got published, you won, and that was the ultimate breaking point. It's like no one else has ever written a book in high school. Only you did.
And I think that's really kind of a key thing is focusing on the wins, and where you have won, because that you've had wins throughout your life. And, we spend a lot of time, unfortunately, as people focusing on the negative, the challenges. And, we have those challenges today, right? Yeah. We have those challenges yesterday, because it's kind of this constant struggle and this learning process, even as you are now running your own business. And, we're of course very involved, and you have people that support you inside this company, employees as well, that are all very good at what they do. But at the end of the day, this is this next step for you. Talking about autism, just having a difficult time even acknowledging potentially that he has autism. Did you ever go through that?
Typically, when you have autism and when you still have those negative effects, it takes a long time to get rid of it and such too, because the mind kind of tends to work a little bit slowly on getting the stuff out or processing new information. It's okay to talk about the negatives, and then as soon as time goes on, we'll think of the positives on this area.
So yeah, it really is. It's identifying the unique abilities, and really concentrating on the things that you can do versus all of the things that you can't. Tyler entered into counseling when you were very young,
That's true.
6 years old, I think.
I think it was.
Yeah.
I was, in third grade, so I think it was 8. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be 8. Yeah. So that really was key. And did you find good benefit, from that, or what were the key benefits, I guess, that you found?
Yeah, I found some amazing benefits too. He was just someone to talk to. He was able to understand, and most importantly, he was there to listen. Going back to self-discovery is knowing things that you can't do is also important, but knowing what you can do is the most important.
Yeah, because when you start concentrating on all the things you can't do, also there's this whole aspect of self-hate.
Realize, hey, you're worth something. You are absolutely worth something. So my tip to you is to even if you do have some doubts, there's always some ways to calm you down, whether it's in music or watching cartoons, even, or writing. Even for me, it's there's always something that you can do to in a way be therapeutic. And who knows, maybe that therapy can be turned to an extraordinary talent that you can share to the world.
You were able to turn around and say, oh, wow, you know what? I do have worth. I do have, something to be able to give. I think that really is the breakthrough, and that is really the possibility that we hold out for everyone in the audience. And one of the big reasons why we talk about this subject. So Tyler, how did you create that breakthrough for yourself? How did you deal with that anger and rage and self-hate?
One thing I did was I just started writing, on little notepads that I did, paper and pen or pencil, and just start writing.
Yeah. So give us some examples of self-discovery. Give us, some examples of when all of a sudden you kind of became conscious of yourself versus just kind of going through the motions or the routines of life.
So one of the great examples of self-discovery is knowing when you're overwhelmed and why.
That's a big one.
That's one of the biggest things is knowing when you're overwhelmed and why. Typically, when you're overwhelmed, people would know it and they have to take you out. But by yourself, you would make that decision on when you are overwhelmed and why that is.
Yeah, and I remember as you were doing that process of self-discovery, that's actually what you would say. You would say, Dad, I need some help.
Yeah.
And we knew that, okay, we needed to do something different. We need to get you out of that situation. Yeah. And now you say that to yourself and you just remove yourself from the situation so you can recharge. How did you develop the skill of knowing when you're overwhelmed?
First of all, you need to, understand what your body's telling you. And that can take a while to understand it because, the mind tends to process things a little differently, a little slower. So knowing when you feel overwhelmed, it came, through my experience, it came to a point of saying that, time tends to slow down a little bit too. And you almost hear things a little differently and sometimes see things. That's when you see the signs saying that something's off, something's wrong. I need to, get out of here. Another example of self-discovery I feel like is very important when it comes to having autism is knowing what can be seen unlike anyone else and explaining why the things may appear in different perspectives.
So explain that.
So here's an example. Autism, we tend to see things a little bit differently. And when you see things like this, you compare it to someone else that see things a little differently too.
Oh, got it. So being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes then.
Yeah, kind of similar to that. Yeah. It's like, all right, this person believes in this, but what do you believe personally? You may think of it this way, while other people generally think of it a different way, and understand why you think this way, and knowing how to, in a way, adapt. That's right. Appropriate, socially appropriate.
Yeah, and that's that whole kind of like world according to Tyler.
Exactly.
Because you believe it to be that way, it's not necessarily that way.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
understanding that.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like understanding what that world is. In a way, that's the one key goal to self-discovery is understanding that little world and how it can adapt to the real life world.
So how did you bridge that gap? How did you start to accept that there were other perspectives other than just yours?
For one thing, it's flexibility. It's
that's a big one. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it took me literally years to fully understand what flexibility is and how to understand the different changes that go on. It's like, just because this happens doesn't mean that's necessarily so.
That started very young with social stories, that basically says, okay, well, here's, expected, unexpected behavior. Here is, acceptable, unacceptable, those kinds of things. And that's really where it started, to understand this whole concept of right and wrong.
Yeah.
But you're right. Those lines start getting blurred, in gray areas. And those are kind of the nuances that you're still in the process of learning.
Yeah.
It's always, all of us in life are kind of in that process.
There's always something new to discover. That's for sure. Especially when it comes to discovering yourself, self-discovery.
Yeah. What would be another example of self-discovery for you?
So this self-discovery is understanding just generally what your expressions are. If you are naturally happy, so if you're happy, you look very angry. So self-discovery is, okay, I should have, I should just, match myself in the reflection and nail down what looks happy because you're happy. If you're angry, what looks angry. If you're sad, how do you make the face when you're sad?
Yeah. So it's actually training yourself. So self-discovery, so that those expressions really are more socially adaptable.
That's exactly right. So you're, in a way, self-training yourself because of these discoveries of emotions and expressions. You're actually self-training yourself on how to be socially acceptable in that area.
So you made a comment, in your outline that says autism can be so misunderstood that the one that has autism would not know what would be going on. Explain that a little bit.
Yeah, that's exactly true. In fact, I've written it on my second book that I'm working on. Is that it is true that oftentimes just because you have autism doesn't always mean that you know everything about it. It's very strange. It's because it's like, okay, things happen. Things are different. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, but you don't really quite understand what it is, or what actually is going around you. You just I feel like people are doing stuff for you without ever questioning. So that's why with self-discovery, I feel like this is entirely important. Very, very important when it comes to autism. Is that when you discover whatever it is, wherever you discover, very simple things, something that defines you. You're not only defining yourself, but you're also defining what autism is in general.
Interesting. Yeah. What autism is for you then.
Yeah, exactly.
Well. But when was it that you started asking why from an introspective, perspective, like looking inward versus the way the world works? When did you start asking why?
Yeah, that's exactly, you're right. Yeah, back then, why was just generally, why does the CD look like a circle? That kind of stuff. It's these silly things. But that was just my general way of communication and how to develop a conversation with others. But generally, why, today's standpoint, it's always very, fascinating to me, because I always kind of ask that question a lot of times. The most biggest number one important thing that I think when it comes to why is tell why yourself, and why you feel like this. Why don't you feel like this?
So has this self-discovery process always been smooth for you?
It has not been very smooth that much. There's it's very hard, very, very challenging too. It takes very much years in this area, even to a point where no matter what kind of discovery is, there are going to be some times where you're going to ultimately embarrass yourself. And so these kind of experience, these discoveries, I would say that, this is just my opinion, but I would say that they are in a way important, in a way to grow. You get to learn these mistakes, learn these embarrassing moments.
How did you start dealing then with the fear of, making a mistake in that learning process?
Okay, so I went down from making a bunch of mistakes to entirely being conscious about mistakes, until being somewhere in the middle where okay, I will make the call, and I am for sure that this will be a good choice, but I'm not entirely 100%. So it's like, so when you're on the very high parts, on the cautious side, it doesn't make you really want to do anything. It feels like, everything that you do is a mistake. That's where it gets really challenging and tricky.
Yeah.
It's like you made so many bad mistakes because you have autism, and now you're at that point where you feel like you don't want to do anything in order to, just avoid embarrassment.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time to fully understand, saying you can still do whatever it is that you want to do as long as you have good intentions.
So how did you break through that? How did you keep going, even though, man, it's like you had these feelings of, I can't do anything right?
I believe was my parents and teachers that never gave up. They always see you as a good kid. They always see you as someone that could possibly shape the world, even, and such. That's the kind of belief that they want in their kid. They just never leave by your side, and it's always been the same thing ever since elementary school.
And then, ultimately, again, we've said this multiple times, throughout the webinar, is focusing on your abilities, not your disabilities.
That's right. The ability to be extraordinary and something that would even to the point of change people's lives.
Yeah. Autism is such a spectrum, and that it can profoundly affect someone to the point where they're non-communicative, rocking in a corner and not able to kind of escape their own world. But in time, there have been case after case after case, child and young adult and adult after adult, that all of a sudden some breakthrough happened, whether it be they found an iPad or a computer, or they were put in front of a piano or some other kind of musical instrument, or given a pen to draw with. And And that became their outlet. That became the way that they communicate. So
absolutely.
So discovering the strengths is hard sometimes, though.
It can be hard too.
So we're kind of at the end of our time here, so what would be, just your closing comments, your closing tips about this whole topic of self-discovery?
It can be very, very hard to fully understand. So once you understand, what you can't do, don't focus on too much on what you can't. Focus on what you can. Once you discover of what you can do and what makes you unique, that's worth celebrating.
So again, thank you very, very much, and we'll look forward to having you at our next webinar.
Take care. See you next time.